The topic of this screencast is geometric formulas. You'll need a piece of paper and a pencil to participate in this lesson. So go ahead and pause this if you need to gather those things up. All right, we're going to draw a square. So draw a square on your paper. Don't worry if it's not a perfect square. And label one side of the square S, which stands for side. Now we're going to use the letter P to stand for perimeter. And let's write a rule that can be used to find the perimeter of a square if we know the length of its side. So we can say P equals S plus S plus S plus S. Or better yet, we can say P equals 4 times S, or 4S. If we substitute the number 2 for the S, we can say that P equals 4 times 2. And we can solve that. P equals 8. Notice that when substituting numbers for letters in a formula, it is good practice to put the number in parentheses. Now let's use the letter A to stand for area. And let's write a rule that can be used to find the area of a square if we know the length of its side. So we can say A, area, A equals S times S. Or we can say area equals S squared. If we substitute the number 2 for the S of this formula, we can say that area equals 2 squared, or solve the problem, A equals 4 units squared. Now draw a rectangle on your paper that is longer in one dimension than the other, and label the length L and the width W. Let's write a rule for finding the area of the rectangle if the length and width are known. So we'll say area A equals length times width. When written side by side, the L and the W mean that we multiply the length by the width. Now let's write a rule for finding the perimeter of a rectangle when the width and length are known. And just as a reminder, when we're finding area, we're talking about all of this area in here, as if I were going to cover this with little carpet squares. But when we talk about perimeter, we're talking about walking around the outside of it like this. So just going around the outside. All right, so let's write a rule for finding the perimeter of a rectangle when we know the length and width. So P equals length plus width plus length plus width. Or, better yet, we can write it like this. P equals 2 times L plus 2 times width. Or, even better, P equals 2 times length plus width. This is probably the simplest way to look at it. Notice that all 3 ways will find the perimeter. But this first way is just too long and confusing. The second way works fine, but the third way is probably the simplest, which good mathematicians like to go for the simplest, most direct way. And because of the distributive property, we can write it this way. This table lists formulas for the perimeter and area of squares, rectangles, parallelograms, and triangles. So those rules that we were creating in the last two slides, those are actually formulas for finding the perimeter and area of these various shapes. The letters P and A, as we said before, stand for perimeter and area. But notice some of these other abbreviations. S stands for side, B for base, H for height, and we see our L and W here that we've already used for length and width. Since squares and rectangles are also parallelograms, the formulas for the perimeter and area of parallelograms may also be used for squares and rectangles. All right, let's try an example. Let's write the formula for the perimeter of a rectangle. So we'll say P equals 2 times length plus 2 times width. Now we'll substitute 8 centimeters for the length. So P equals, whoops, let's erase that. P equals 2 times 8 centimeters plus, let's substitute 5 centimeters for the width. 2 times 5 centimeters. Okay, so now let's solve the equation to find P, or perimeter. All right, P equals, now let's do the multiplication here. 2 times 8, 16 centimeters, plus, let's do the other multiplication. 2 times 5, 10 centimeters. And now we have the final simple addition problem, 26 centimeters. So the perimeter of this rectangle is 26 centimeters. Now let's write the formula for area of parallelogram. So area equals base times height for a parallelogram. Then we'll substitute 7 centimeters for the base and 4 centimeters for the height and solve the problem. So A equals, and we're saying the base is 7 centimeters. And remember, we put it in parentheses when we're substituting numbers for the letters in the formula. And the height is 4 centimeters. And now we can solve the problem to find A, or area. So 7 times 4 is 28. And centimeter times centimeter is centimeter squared. So the answer to our problem is 28 centimeters squared.